The quantum distortion signature should have been impossible. Captain Sarah Rodriguez watched the sensor readings with a mixture of professional calm and barely contained excitement. The assassination attempt had been meticulously planned, so perfect that it should have worked in any other scenario, against any other species. The diplomatic shuttle Horizon had been tagged as an easy target. A lone human vessel, carrying a small diplomatic contingent through the contested Orion Reach, it was the perfect opportunity for the syndicate of aligned races to send a message. Humanity was becoming too ambitious, too disruptive to the carefully maintained galactic order. Someone needed to remind them of their place. What the syndicate didn't understand was that easy target was not a phrase that applied to humans anymore. Sarah's neural link flickered with incoming tactical data. The assassination team's approach vector, their quantum masking techniques, even the specific weaponry they'd chosen, all of it was laid out in her augmented vision, like a detailed schematic. Humans had learned to turn every attack into an opportunity for intelligence gathering. Incoming hostile vessels, her AI assistant, ARIA, reported. The voice was calm, almost bored. 4 Cathax stealth interceptors, quantum masked drive signatures. Weapon loadout suggests total hull penetration capability. The Cathax were notorious. Apex predators from a high-gravity world, they were considered the most feared mercenary force in the known galaxy. Their ships were living biomechanical constructs, capable of adapting mid-combat, with weapon systems that could dissolve most ship hulls in seconds. Sarah's lips curved into what might generously be called a smile. "Hold course," she commanded. "Do not alter vector." In the shuttle's diplomatic section, Ambassador Marcus Chen reviewed the latest communication intercepts. Where others saw a potential death trap, he saw an opportunity. The syndicate's move was desperate, reactive, which meant they were losing control of the narrative. "They're going to regret this," Chen muttered, his fingers dancing across a holographic interface that was parsing through terabytes of intercepted communications. The first attack came exactly as the sensor logs predicted. A quantum-compressed plasma burst that would have obliterated most ships instantly. But the Horizon wasn't most ships. Its hull was a marvel of human adaptive engineering, metamaterials that could redistribute energy, self-repair instantaneously, and transform incoming weapon energy into additional power. The plasma burst dissolved against the shuttle's hull like water against treated glass. Inside the Cathax lead interceptor, the weapons officer's compound eyes widened in shock. "Impossible," she chittered to the ship's bioneural commander. "Weapon systems show 0 penetration." Before they could recalibrate, the Horizon's response came. Not with weapons, but with something far more devastating. A quantum communication burst that wasn't just a message, it was a weapon. Information weaponized to surgical precision. Every secret communication, every back-channel negotiation, every hidden alliance of the Cathax mercenary group began streaming out, encrypted but perfectly comprehensible. The explosion wasn't physical, it was informational. By the time the remaining Cathax vessels could react, their entire operational network had been exposed. Contracts were being canceled, hidden bases were being revealed, decades of carefully maintained anonymity were dissolving in real time. Sarah's voice was almost gentle when she opened a communication channel. "I suggest you surrender. Continuing this engagement will only expose more of your operations." The Cathax commander knew defeat when he saw it. Humans had turned an assassination attempt into a complete strategic dismantling of their entire organization. As the surviving vessels powered down their weapons, Sarah turned to her small crew. "Log everything. The Galactic Senate is going to want a full report." Aria's voice held a hint of what might have been amusement. "Threat neutralized. Shall I begin compiling the after-action report?" "Immediately," Sarah responded. "And make sure it's thorough. We want to send a message." Outside the viewport, the stars of the Orion Reach continued their silent dance, indifferent to the strategic ballet that had just played out. Another lesson had been delivered. Underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. The Galactic Senate Chamber was a marvel of architectural design, a massive, multi-leveled amphitheater that could simultaneously accommodate beings of wildly different physiologies. Gravity modulators, atmospheric filters, and translation matrices worked in concert to create a space where representatives from over 200 sentient species could coexist. Ambassador Marcus Chen walked into this carefully balanced ecosystem like a surgical instrument. He was not imposing physically. At 1.75 meters, with a lean build and features that spoke of mixed human ancestry, Chen could have been easily overlooked. But overlooking Marcus Chen was a mistake no intelligent species made twice. His neural link suit was a work of art, adaptive metamaterial that shifted colors and textures based on complex diplomatic algorithms. Today, it was a deep midnight blue with subtle silver threads that seemed to move like flowing data streams. Each thread was actually a real-time information conduit, processing billions of data points per second. The Cathax delegation sat clustered together, their exoskeletal forms a nightmare of chitin and compound eyes, radiating an aura of predatory menace. They had arrived expecting to be the hunters. Instead, they were about to become the dissected. Representatives of the Galactic Senate, Chen began, his voice translated into a dozen primary languages simultaneously. We are here to discuss the recent unauthorized military action against a Terran diplomatic vessel. A ripple of tension spread through the chamber. The Cathax representatives shifted, their multiple limbs creating a subtle clicking sound that typically signaled aggression. But Chen was already moving. With a gesture, holographic displays erupted around the chamber. Not just images, but living, breathing data ecosystems. Every communication, every back-channel negotiation, every hidden contract of the Cathax mercenary network began to unfold. Bank transfers, illegal weapons contracts, covert operations targeting multiple species. The Cathax had not just attacked a human vessel, they had been systematically destabilizing entire sectors of galactic civilization. And now, everyone could see it. The Vrelnok representatives, a species known for their bureaucratic precision, were the first to react. Their translucent membranes rippled with what could only be described as diplomatic horror. Contracts they had signed, believing them to be confidential, were now public record. These allegations air. The lead Cathax diplomat began, but Chen wasn't finished. Another gesture, more data. This time focusing on the financial networks that supported these operations. Shell corporations, cryptocurrency laundering. Entire economic ecosystems built on destabilization and conflict. Not allegations, Chen corrected, his voice calm. Documented facts. The chamber's ambient temperature seemed to drop. Representatives from species who had long suspected but never proven the Cathax's systematic manipulations were now seeing absolute proof. But Chen wasn't just destroying the Cathax. He was rebuilding the narrative. We're not seeking retribution, he continued. We're offering a path to restructuring. These networks of conflict can be transformed into collaborative economic opportunities. It was a masterpiece of diplomatic judo. The Cathax weren't just being punished, they were being offered a lifeline, a way to transform their existing networks into legitimate economic channels. Some species would have demanded blood. Humans were offering a business plan. The syndicate of aligned races, who had orchestrated the attack, were watching their carefully constructed plan dissolve in real time. What was meant to be a demonstration of human vulnerability had become a comprehensive exposure of their own corrupt networks. As the session continued, Chen wasn't just presenting information. He was conducting a symphony of diplomatic destruction and reconstruction. Each revelation was precisely calculated, each suggestion a strategic masterpiece. When he finally concluded, the Galactic Senate sat in stunned silence. The Cathax delegation was already receiving preliminary economic restructuring proposals, not as a punishment, but as a collaborative opportunity. Outside the chamber, the first waves of economic recalibration were already beginning. Stock markets shifted. Diplomatic channels realigned. An entire sector of galactic civilization was being quietly, efficiently redesigned. And at the center of it all stood Marcus Chen, looking for all the world like someone who had just finished a moderately interesting paperwork review. Another lesson had been delivered. In the game of galactic politics, humanity played by entirely different rules. Dr. Elena Kovacs didn't look like someone about to reshape galactic economics. Her workspace was a controlled chaos of holographic displays, quantum computing nodes, and what appeared to be an impossible number of coffee mugs. Each mug told a story, souvenirs from research stations across human-explored space, each one a testament to her decade-long journey of economic reimagination. The Adaptive Economic Recalibration Algorithm, AERA, wasn't just a piece of software. It was a living, breathing economic organism that humans had birthed into the galactic ecosystem. In the gleaming conference room of the Terran Economic Transformation Division, Kovacs stood before a gathering of the most skeptical economic minds in human history. Her team was a diverse collective. Economists, quantum mathematicians, social psychologists, and AI specialists who had been working in absolute secrecy for the past 5 years. Traditional economic models are static, Kovacs began, her neural link projecting intricate holographic representations of economic flow. They assume fixed parameters, stable markets, predictable interactions, but the galaxy is none of those things. The hologram shifted. What started as a complex web of interconnected economic nodes began to pulse and move. It was alive, breathing, adapting, responding to simulated disruptions in real time. AERA was different from any economic model the galaxy had ever seen. Where traditional economic algorithms tried to predict and control, AERA learned and transformed. It didn't just analyze economic data, it understood the psychological and cultural motivations behind economic interactions. The first test came with the Kovacs economic network. Instead of destruction, AERA proposed a complete restructuring that would turn their existing illegal networks into legitimate economic channels. Take their weapons trafficking network. AERA didn't just expose it. It provided a comprehensive plan to transform those logistics into humanitarian supply chains. The same infrastructure that moved illegal weapons could now move medical supplies, educational resources, and technological aid to underdeveloped worlds. We're not eliminating their economic structure, Kovacs explained. We're evolving it. The algorithm worked at quantum computational speeds that made existing galactic economic systems look like abacuses. It could process complex economic interactions across hundreds of species, taking into account cultural nuances, psychological motivations, and long-term systemic impacts. Vrolnak Economic Advisor, a being composed of intricate biocrystalline structures that communicated through complex light patterns, watched in growing fascination. The AERA system was solving economic challenges that had paralyzed their civilization for centuries. Poverty wasn't just a number to be managed. It was a complex systemic challenge to be transformed. Take the resource-poor planets of the Zincor cluster. Previous economic models had written them off as perpetual economic sinkholes. AERA saw something different. It identified unique cultural skills, unexplored technological potentials, and adaptive economic strategies that could turn these worlds from economic burdens into galactic innovation centers. Within hours of initial implementation, entire economic ecosystems began to shift, not through force, but through an almost organic process of adaptive transformation. The truly terrifying part for other galactic powers, humans weren't just offering a solution, they were demonstrating a completely new way of thinking about economic interaction. Economics is not about money, Kovacs told her team. It's about potential, about human and alien capability. Each economic transformation became a case study. The Kovacs logistics network repurposed. The Zincor worlds reimagined. Resource distribution algorithms that could predict and prevent economic conflicts before they began. By the end of the first week, the galactic economic landscape had been fundamentally redesigned. not through conquest, but through understanding, not through destruction, but through transformation. The Terran Economic Transformation Division wasn't just an office. It was a revolution disguised as a bureaucratic department. As Dr. Kovacs looked out over the holographic representation of the new economic model, she allowed herself a small smile. They weren't just changing economies. They were teaching the galaxy how to think differently. Another lesson had been delivered. In the realm of economic strategy, humanity played an entirely different game. The research station orbiting Krell 9 was a monument to failure. For 3 centuries, it had been the most notorious dead end in synorcheological exploration. 17 different species had attempted to unlock the mysteries of the planet's long-extinct civilization, each expedition more sophisticated than the last, and each ending in absolute defeat. Dr. Naomi Chen stood at the station's primary observation deck, her augmented eyes scanning the rust-colored planet below. Where others saw a dead world, she saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. AI, she called to her AI companion, run another quantum resonance scan. I want to see something we missed before. The station's AI was unlike any other in the Galactic Research Network. Developed by humans, it was part computational system, part creative problem solver, part intuitive investigator. AI wasn't just a tool, it was a research partner. The holographic display flickered to life, layers of quantum data beginning to peel back the planet's geological history. Most research teams would have given up decades ago. The planet showed no signs of technological remnants, no clear indications of the civilization that had once thrived here. But humans didn't understand the word impossible. Dr. Chen's team was a perfect example of humanity's approach to seemingly insurmountable challenges. Composed of specialists from disciplines that traditionally never worked together, quantum archaeologists, xenolinguists, adaptive systems engineers, and cultural reconstruction experts, they approached Krell 9 like a multi-dimensional chess problem. Microvariation detected in the 3rd geological strata, AI reported. The AI's voice held something almost like excitement, anomalous quantum signature, previously masked by natural radiation interference. Most research AIs would have presented data. AI proposed hypotheses. The first breakthrough came not from massive scanning equipment, but from a series of microscopic quantum probes, designed to adapt and self-modify. These weren't just tools, they were almost living entities of pure information and computational potential. As the probes began to map the planet's subsurface, a story started to emerge. The civilization of Krell 9 hadn't been destroyed. They had transcended. It's not a dead world, Dr. Chen muttered. It's a chrysalis. The probes revealed a network of quantum-encoded information so dense, so complex, that previous scanning technologies had simply been unable to perceive it. Entire libraries of knowledge, technological blueprints, cultural memories, all preserved in a state between matter and pure information. Most species would have approached this as a research project. Humans saw it as a resurrection. Within days, the first technological reconstructions began. Not just recreations, but living interpretations of the Krell civilization's most advanced technologies. Adaptive energy systems that could transform environmental radiation into usable power. Communication networks that function more like living neural systems than traditional communication infrastructure. The Galactic Research Consortium watched in growing horror and fascination. What had been a 3-century dead end was becoming the most significant technological discovery in recent galactic history. Dr. Chen wasn't just recovering a lost civilization. She was giving it new life. The breakthrough came during what should have been a routine data correlation session. AI's quantum analysis revealed something extraordinary. The Krell civilization hadn't been destroyed. They had deliberately encoded their entire technological and cultural essence into a quantum preservation matrix, waiting for a species capable of understanding and resurrecting them. They were waiting for us, Dr. Chen realized. Not for humans specifically, but for a species with the right combination of technological adaptability and cultural curiosity. By the end of the first month, the research station was no longer just a research facility. It was a rebirth chamber for an entire lost civilization. Technological reconstructions began appearing. Energy systems that could transform entire planetary ecosystems. Communication networks that redefined the concept of information transfer. Adaptive architectural systems that could reshape themselves based on environmental and social needs. The Krell weren't just being remembered, they were being reborn. When the first comprehensive report reached the Galactic Senate, it came with a message that sent shivers through every research institution in known space. Some civilizations die, some hibernate, some wait to be understood. And humanity knew how to listen. The methane world of Zincor was not designed for visitors. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most species, temperatures that could freeze neutron stars, and a biochemical ecosystem so alien that traditional life support systems were useless. Most diplomatic missions would have been impossible. Zara Martinez arrived with nothing more than a neural adaptive environmental suit and a portfolio of cultural intervention strategies that would make traditional diplomats weep. She wasn't a diplomat in the traditional sense. Part cultural anthropologist, part memetic engineer, part social network architect. Zara represented a new breed of human cultural specialist. Her mission wasn't to negotiate. It was to transform. The Zincor were a species of collective consciousness, a billion individual entities that existed in a constant state of network communication, deeply isolationist, technologically advanced, but culturally stagnant. They had watched the galaxy from their methane world, rejecting all external contact for millennia. Most species saw an impenetrable culture. Zara saw an ecosystem waiting to be catalyzed. Her first weapon was music. Not just any music. A carefully engineered set of audio neural compositions that were part mathematical algorithm, part emotional landscape. Each piece was designed to bypass the Zincor's collective defensive membranes. Intricate sound patterns that could penetrate their neural networks without triggering cultural rejection responses. The first transmission was innocuous. A collection of algorithmic compositions that seemed like pure mathematical expression. But embedded within the sound waves were complex cultural narratives, adaptive learning patterns, and memetic structures that would slowly reshape perceptual frameworks. Within weeks, something extraordinary began to happen. Young Zincor, or what passed for youth in their collective consciousness, began to change. Their neural networks started displaying unprecedented levels of individual divergence. Where once they had been a perfectly synchronized collective, now subtle variations began to emerge. They discovered individual curiosity. The music was just the beginning. Each composition was a Trojan horse of cultural information, mathematical patterns that told stories of innovation, collaboration, individual potential. Rhythmic structures that suggested alternative ways of collective organization. Traditional diplomatic missions would have taken centuries to create such change. Zara's team was doing it in months. Digital content followed. Not human media directly, but carefully constructed narrative experiences that could penetrate the Zincor's unique perceptual frameworks. Educational modules that looked like pure information transfer, but were actually sophisticated cultural intervention tools. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps watched in growing alarm. This wasn't colonization. This wasn't even traditional cultural exchange. This was something entirely new. A form of cultural evolution weaponized as a collaborative process. By the 6th month, the first signs of transformation were unmistakable. Zincor collective nodes were beginning to develop what could only be described as individual personalities. They were asking questions that had been unthinkable in their previous cultural framework. Questions about individual potential, about collaborative innovation, about the possibilities that existed beyond their methane world. Zara's reports back to Earth were clinical, almost understated. Each transmission was a masterpiece of scientific observation that masked a revolutionary process of cultural transformation. Subject cultures displaying unprecedented neural plasticity, one report read. Memetic intervention protocols achieving geometric progression of adaptive potential. In bureaucratic language, she was describing nothing less than a cultural revolution. The Zen Corps weren't being conquered. They were being invited to evolve. By the end of the first year, the impossible had happened. The most isolationist species in the known galaxy was preparing its first extraplanetary mission. Not through military pressure, not through economic coercion, but through a carefully orchestrated process of cultural catalyzation. When the first Zen Corps diplomatic envoy was prepared, they requested that Zara Martinez be present as their cultural liaison. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Humanity hadn't just made first contact. They had reimagined the entire concept of cultural interaction. Another lesson had been delivered. In the art of cultural transformation, humans played an entirely different game. The Galactic Strategic Simulation Center was a marvel of Zen architectural design. A massive spherical structure that could simultaneously accommodate military strategists from over 50 different species. Its central chamber was a living, breathing holographic representation of potential conflict scenarios. General Marcus Rodriguez stood at the center of this technological wonder, looking decidedly out of place. Where other military leaders arrived with elaborate ceremonial uniforms and intimidating cybernetic augmentations, Rodriguez wore a simple adaptive environment suit. His only visible technology was a neural link band that seemed almost understated. The gathered military strategists represented the most advanced warrior cultures in the known galaxy. The crystalline combat minds of the Vornax, the bioengineered tactical organisms of the Krull Imperium, quantum predictive war algorithms from a dozen different civilizations. They had come to discuss humanity's approach to strategic conflict, and most believed they were about to witness a demonstration of human military weakness. They were monumentally wrong. Conflict is a failure of imagination. Rodriguez began, his voice translated across multiple linguistic and sensory spectrums. The holographic display came to life. But this wasn't a typical military simulation. Instead, it was a complex, living ecosystem of potential interactions. Where traditional military strategy showed force concentrations and battle lines, this display showed something entirely different. Economic networks, cultural exchange pathways, resource distribution models, psychological interaction matrices. The military strategists watched in growing confusion, and then horror. Humanity wasn't preparing for war. They were making war itself obsolete. Take the ongoing tensions in the Carina sector. Traditional strategic analysis would focus on fleet deployments, weapon systems, defensive capabilities. Rodriguez's presentation showed something radically different. The conflict was rooted in three primary factors: water resource scarcity, generational cultural misunderstandings, outdated economic interdependency models. The human solution wasn't military intervention. It was a comprehensive restructuring of the entire systemic interaction. Adaptive water generation technologies, cultural exchange programs, economic redesign that turned potential conflict zones into collaborative innovation centers. War is what happens, Rodriguez explained, when civilizations lack the imagination to see alternative solutions. Each potential conflict scenario became a case study in prevention. The quantum predictive model showed not just how to avoid war, but how to transform the underlying conditions that created conflict. The Vornax military advisors, beings of pure computational consciousness, found themselves genuinely perplexed. Their entire strategic doctrine was based on predictive conflict resolution. Humans were showing them an entirely new paradigm. Where the Vornax saw potential enemies, humans saw potential collaborators. The simulation continued. Potential flashpoint after potential flashpoint, each one dissolved not through military might, but through a combination of technological innovation, cultural understanding, and systemic redesign. A resource conflict became a joint scientific research initiative. A territorial dispute transformed into a collaborative ecological restoration project. Historical enmities reframed as opportunities for mutual growth. The most terrifying part for the assembled strategists. This wasn't theoretical. These were actual interventions that humans were already implementing across multiple sectors. The holographic display wasn't just a simulation. It was a living map of humanity's approach to galactic interaction. By the final demonstration, the military strategists from various species sat in stunned silence. This wasn't a presentation of military strategy. This was a complete reimagining of the concept of strategic interaction. "We're not preparing for war," Rodriguez concluded. "We're designing systems that make war unthinkable." The final slide of the presentation wasn't a battle plan. It was a complex diagram showing potential collaborative pathways between civilizations. Every intersection point was a potential innovation center. Every potential conflict zone was reimagined as a collaborative opportunity. When the presentation concluded, something unprecedented happened. Representatives from species that had been historical enemies began spontaneously discussing collaborative initiatives. The Galactic Strategic Simulation Center had just witnessed a revolution. Not a revolution of weapons, a revolution of imagination. Another lesson had been delivered. In the realm of strategic thinking, humanity played an entirely different game. The Nexus Conference was never meant to change everything. It was supposed to be another routine gathering of galactic diplomatic and scientific leadership, a carefully choreographed dance of political posturing and minimal substantive progress. Dr. Arya Chen arrived with something far more dangerous than any weapon. She carried what looked like an unremarkable data crystal, a quantum-encoded storage device that most species would dismiss as a standard communication tool. In reality, it was the culmination of humanity's most ambitious strategic research project, the Collaborative Potential Matrix. The conference was held on a massive space station that orbited a binary star system, neutral ground chosen specifically to minimize potential territorial tensions. Representatives from over 217 known sentient species filled the massive circular chamber, each delegation carefully positioned to maintain complex historical diplomatic balances. What they didn't realize was that the balance was about to be permanently disrupted. The Collaborative Potential Matrix was more than a database. It was a living, adaptive strategic model that could simultaneously process historical conflicts, current resource distributions, cultural psychological profiles, and potential collaborative opportunities across entire civilizations. Most species approached strategic planning like a game of chess. Move, countermove, territorial acquisition. Humans saw it as a comprehensive ecosystem of potential interactions. Dr. Chen's presentation began quietly. No dramatic gestures, no inflammatory rhetoric, just a systematic deconstruction of existing galactic interaction models. The first layer revealed was economic. The matrix demonstrated how seemingly unrelated resource distributions could be reimagined as collaborative opportunities. A water-scarce planet's technological limitations could be precisely matched with a resource-rich civilization's excess capacity, not as a trade deal, but as a comprehensive co-development strategy. The Vrelnok delegation, known for their Byzantine economic models, watched with growing unease. Their entire diplomatic approach was being dismantled and reconstructed in real time. But economic analysis was just the beginning. The next layer exposed cultural interaction potentials. The matrix could predict with unprecedented accuracy how different species' cultural communication models could be aligned, not through forced assimilation, but through genuine mutual understanding. Take the long-standing conflict between the methane-breathing Zincor and the oxygen-based Krulnoks. Previous diplomatic efforts had always focused on their differences. The Collaborative Potential Matrix revealed intricate shared psychological structures that could form the basis of unprecedented cooperation. Military strategists from various delegations began to shift uncomfortably. This wasn't just analysis. This was a complete reimagining of strategic interaction. The truly terrifying part emerged in the final presentation layer. The matrix wasn't just predictive, it was prescriptive. It could demonstrate how redirecting a fraction of existing military budgets into joint research initiatives could solve multiple systemic challenges simultaneously. Conflicts that had seemed intractable for centuries were being dissolved not through negotiation, but through a comprehensive understanding of systemic potential. "We're not proposing solutions," Dr. Chen explained, her voice calm and precise. "We're revealing possibilities that have always existed but were never perceived." The conference chamber had fallen into a profound silence. Representatives from species that had been historical enemies were now looking at each other with a mixture of confusion and nascent understanding. The collaborative potential matrix did something unprecedented. It transformed conflict from a zero-sum game into a multi-dimensional collaborative opportunity. By the conference's conclusion, something extraordinary had happened. Diplomatic channels that had been frozen for centuries began to thaw. Joint research initiatives were being proposed. Economic restructuring plans were being drafted. Not through coercion, through understanding. The crystal that Dr. Chen had brought wasn't just a data storage device. It was a key that had unlocked a new way of perceiving galactic civilization. When the final reports were compiled, historians would mark this moment as the beginning of a new era, the moment when humanity didn't just participate in galactic civilization. They fundamentally reimagined its potential. Another lesson had been delivered. In the realm of strategic thinking, humanity played an entirely different game. A game where everyone could potentially win. The Galactic Core Reconstruction Summit was never meant to be a turning point. It was supposed to be another bureaucratic gathering, another exercise in diplomatic posturing. No one had told the humans that. Captain Sarah Rodriguez stood at the center of the massive holographic chamber, surrounded by representatives from 312 different sentient species. The room itself was a marvel of Zen architectural design. Adaptive environmental systems that could simultaneously support beings from methane worlds, high-gravity planets, and energy-based life forms. But today, it wasn't the architecture that would be remembered. It was the transformation. The summit had been called to address a fundamental galactic challenge: systemic instability. Centuries of fractured interactions, unresolved conflicts, and competitive resource management had pushed the galactic civilization to the brink of systemic collapse. Most delegations arrived expecting the usual diplomatic dance: posturing, minimal compromise, incremental progress. Humanity arrived with something entirely different. The presentation began not with words, but with a living, breathing holographic representation of galactic potential. It wasn't a static map. It was a dynamic ecosystem of interconnected possibilities. Every conflict became a collaborative opportunity. Every resource limitation transformed into a shared innovation challenge. The collaborative potential matrix, developed by Dr. Aria Chen and her team, was more than a strategic tool. It was a fundamental reimagining of how civilizations could interact. "We're not here to solve problems," Rodriguez began, her voice translated across multiple sensory and linguistic spectrums. "We're here to reveal possibilities." The holographic display began to pulse with life. Economic networks that had been rigid for millennia suddenly showed flexibility. Cultural exchange pathways that had been blocked began to open. Technological potential that had been trapped by competitive models started to flow. The KFAX delegation, once known for their mercenary aggression, watched as their entire economic and cultural infrastructure was reimagined, not as a punishment, but as a collaborative reconstruction. Their weapons trafficking networks, transformed into humanitarian supply chains, their aggressive territorial expansions, redirected into joint scientific research initiatives. Their cultural isolationism, redesigned as a unique contribution to galactic diversity. Most species would have seen this as an invasion. The KFAX began to see it as an invitation to evolution. The Vrlnak, masters of bureaucratic complexity, found their entire administrative model being systematically redesigned, not through external pressure, but through a comprehensive understanding of their own systemic potential. Technological barriers dissolved. Cultural misunderstandings became opportunities for mutual growth. Economic competition transformed into collaborative innovation. By the summit's midpoint, something unprecedented was happening. Representatives from species that had been historical enemies were drafting joint research initiatives. Economic models that had been frozen for centuries began to show unprecedented flexibility. This wasn't diplomacy. This was a comprehensive redesign of galactic civilization. The final presentation layer revealed the true scope of humanity's approach. It wasn't about human superiority. It was about collective potential. Every species had unique capabilities. Humanity's role wasn't to dominate, but to help reveal those capabilities, to create systems where every civilization could thrive. The methane-breathing Zincor, the energy-based life forms of the quantum nexus, the silicon-based civilizations of the Outer Rim. Each was shown not as a challenge to be managed, but as a unique contribution to a larger ecosystem. When the final proposals were presented, something extraordinary happened. The usual diplomatic gridlock dissolved. Complex, multi-species collaborative initiatives were drafted in real time. Technological exchange programs, cultural adaptation frameworks, economic restructuring models. The Galactic Core Reconstruction Summit was supposed to be another bureaucratic gathering. Instead, it became the moment when galactic civilization was fundamentally redesigned. As the final session concluded, Rodriguez looked out over the assembled delegates, not with triumph, not with aggression, but with a simple, profound understanding. Every species had potential. Humanity's role was simply to help reveal it. The galaxy watched and began to transform. Epilogue. Some civilizations conquer. Some civilizations explore. Humanity invited the galaxy to evolve.